After he regained his memory and became the heir of a wealthy family, everyone assumed Peter would divorce me. Now, a single cufflink on him is worth over $1 million. Meanwhile, holding our daughter's hand, I was nothing more than a country hair-washing girl in the eyes of his friends. We looked completely mismatched. But the man remained indifferent and only said, "Stay by my side." I thought our marriage still counted. I thought I was still his rightful wife. Later, news of his marriage alliance spread throughout the entire social circle. "As for me," he said with complete certainty, "the child is still here. She won't leave." I merely rubbed the corner of my clothes between my fingers and went to find his mother. "I want to leave." Later, I headed south alone. I didn't want the child. And I didn't want him either. Chapter 1. Mommy, is Daddy going to marry someone else? When Linda asked that question, the spoon in my hand clinked sharply against the side of the porcelain bowl. I turned around and met her innocent, youthful eyes, filled with confusion and hurt. Gently stroking her hair, I couldn't help but laugh as I asked, "How could Daddy marry someone else? Where did you hear such nonsense?" She lowered her head and picked at her fingers, her little lips pouting. "Aunt Jade said it." She also said, "Linda is an illegitimate child." "Mommy, what's an illegitimate child?" A child's voice was naturally bright and pleasant. But the moment those words left her mouth, it felt as if something slammed heavily into my chest. Before I could think, I instinctively pulled her into my arms. I was comforting her, but it felt more like I was desperately trying to convince myself, Linda will always be Mommy and Daddy's precious treasure. Aunt Jade has just been a little sick lately. Smiling, I tapped her forehead lightly. "You know how it is. When people get sick, their brains get all scrambled, right?" She pressed her lips together, then broke into a small smile and wrinkled her nose. "When your brain gets scrambled, you start talking nonsense." I smiled. "That's right. You're very smart." The little girl hugged her rabbit plushie and suddenly rested her head against my hand. "Mommy, don't be sad." My fingers curled involuntarily against the heat in my palm. My eyes stung. I had to use every ounce of strength to keep myself from crying because of that innocent attempt at comforting me. I stared at her motionlessly, my gaze moving from her childish face to the stuffed rabbit in her arms. The rabbit plushie looked dull and dusty, its long ears drooping limply. There was nothing remarkable about it. Yet it cost 83,400 yuan. She had an entire room filled with toys just like it. Who would have thought that only a year ago? Even with all our efforts and sacrifices, the best she could have gotten was an ordinary stuffed toy sold everywhere on the market, roughly made. And if you bargained hard enough, maybe you could buy one for 50 yuan. Soft carpeting covered the floor, swallowing every sound of my footsteps. I no longer needed to tiptoe out of her bedroom as carefully as I had in the past. The Aunt Jade Linda mentioned was the nanny Peter had brought from the family estate to take care of us. I had always known she disliked both Linda and me. Later, I learned by chance that she had a daughter who had admired Peter for many years. The villa's security cameras were crystal clear. I heard every single word she said. The mother doesn't even have a proper status. If the child isn't an illegitimate child, then what is she? Lowering my eyes, I clenched my hands uncontrollably. Chapter 2. The day Peter suddenly regained his memories. He was involved in a car accident. When I rushed to the hospital with Linda, he was sitting on the edge of the bed. Hearing the noise, he slowly turned to look at us. He was still wearing the same faded clothes he had left home in that morning, but the look in his eyes was so unfamiliar that I didn't know what to do. Whenever Linda called him Daddy before, no matter how busy he was, he would crouch down and answer her. But that day, Linda's voice grew softer and softer each time she called him. Not until the 7th time did he finally respond with a faint acknowledgement. I was frightened by his unfamiliarity, yet at the same time, I was happy for his rebirth. No matter how much love a person receives later in life, they always want to find the road they came from. Only then can they truly be considered whole. What I didn't know at the time was that between him and me, between him and that rural village, there existed a gap as vast as worlds apart. Countless times, I have thought that if fate had not intervened, our lives would probably never have crossed. Even after several lifetimes, when the Su family came to take him away, everything was done swiftly and discreetly. Not even the neighbors noticed. No matter how little I understood about the world, at that moment I clearly realized that if he wanted to leave, There was no way I could stop him. And once he left, mountains and rivers would separate us forever. I looked around the bare, unfinished house. It was the new home we had built that year. The money we had saved over the years had only been enough to complete the structure and cover the floors with a thin layer of cement. As for renovations, we would need to save for several more years. We always said that Linda was still young. By the time she grew up, renovating wouldn't be too late. That way, we wouldn't have to worry about the design style becoming outdated. Amid the chaos in my mind, I rationally extended my hand toward him. You can leave, but whether it's for saving your life, the bond we shared as husband and wife, or your responsibility as Linda's father, you owe me some money. I need it to raise Linda. I couldn't keep him, but emotionally and logically, I had to hold on to whatever I could. At the time, a newly installed incandescent light bulb hung from a stick in the corner of the wall. It shone as brightly as it could, yet still failed to illuminate the entire house. In the dim light, Peter stared at my outstretched hand for a long time. No one knew what he was thinking. I only remembered that he took my cold hand into his own and said casually, "What are you thinking about? You and Linda are coming back with me." And so, at the dock that day, there was a crowded mass of people on one side and a waiting ferry on the other. The car drove directly onto the ferry and left the island. Even when we boarded the plane afterward, no one knew who was sitting inside. Perhaps I was too greedy, using the excuse of wanting to give Linda a complete family. I foolishly stepped into an entirely unfamiliar world. Everyone believed that even if Peter brought me back, it was only for appearance's sake. Sooner or later, we would get divorced. Yet over the past year, no matter how busy he was or how late he worked, he always returned to the villa. Just moments ago, while I was still in Linda's room, I had heard him come home. I needed to talk to Peter about what had happened to Linda. It would be more appropriate for him to handle it personally. We had legally registered our marriage. We had held a wedding. Linda had been born out of love and anticipation. She was never an illegitimate child. Peter had promised that once everything settled down, we would register our marriage again using his true identity. If he knew someone had spoken about Linda that way, he would definitely lose his temper. As I walked downstairs, I carefully considered my words, hoping to bring it up as tactfully as possible. The villa was so large that it felt almost empty. I pushed open several doors but couldn't find Peter anywhere. Then, as I reached a turn in the staircase, voices came from a half-open door nearby. Chapter 3. Peter, I heard from Madam that the date for your engagement has already been chosen? Engagement? For a moment, I thought I had misheard. The word engagement and Peter simply didn't belong together. He had a child. Perhaps he even had a wife. How could he possibly get engaged to someone else? Dressed in an impeccable suit, the man tightened his brows and impatiently tugged at his tie. The exquisite cufflinks at his wrists gleamed brilliantly. My mother told you that? He lowered his head and lit a cigarette. Smoke curled around the sharp bridge of his nose. Stop asking about it, and keep your mouth shut at home. Isn't it already common knowledge? I don't need to hear it from your mother. I'm happy for you. Marrying the Liu family's daughter is the proper path for someone like you. For the sake of stability these past few years, your father has been giving people far too much freedom. He even dared to bring that illegitimate son from outside back into the family. While you were gone all those years, that boy almost climbed to the top. You're the legitimate heir of the Su family. A proper marriage should naturally be with someone from an equally prestigious family. It's just, what are you planning to do with Miss Ning? Send her back to the countryside? Peter Su glanced at her. Are you joking? She doesn't need to leave. And she won't leave. Linda is still here. Where exactly do you think she could go? The elderly nanny smiled. That makes sense. It's nothing more than spending a little money to support her. It's not like she's any trouble. From where I stood, I could clearly see the indifference in his eyes. Power and status really could reshape a person's very nature. Back then, there was no way such cold detachment would ever have appeared in his eyes. That lofty indifference, that casual superiority from above. For my sake. He used to stand awkwardly in front of flower stalls just to buy the bouquet I liked. He would smile humbly and patiently bargain over every yuan. Only at that moment did I truly understand. The man named Casey had died the moment he became Peter. Silently, without a sound, I gripped my phone tightly. Inside my chest was a vast emptiness. I desperately wanted to find something, anything, to fill that terrifying void. Looking around frantically, I found myself yearning to see my daughter more than anything else. I hurried away without listening to another word from behind that door. Also, he crushed the cigarette in the ashtray. How many times have I told you this? Either call her by her name or address her as Mrs. Sue. What's with calling her Miss Ning all day long? And the food on the table outside, she hasn't touched a single bite. Has she? The nanny had deliberately left the dishes there. As for her reasons, only she knew. The old woman clicked her tongue. She really is difficult. If she won't eat it, why don't you have some? It's all your favorite food. Jade. His voice turned cold. You'd better remember why I agreed to let you come here in the first place. It's been a year, and you still don't know she's allergic to eggs. It's such a simple thing. If you can't even handle that, go back to the family estate. There are plenty of people who can do your job. Peter rarely lost his temper with her. After all, she had been his mother's personal nanny for decades and was practically an elder in the family. A man who had been pampered from birth had suddenly endured several years of hardship and upheaval. The easygoing temperament he once had was gone. The patience and courtesy he used to show everyone had disappeared as well. As the old nanny bent her waist cautiously and nervously, he offered no comfort at all. Instead, he found the bottle of liquor he had been looking for, picked it up, and walked straight out of the room. Chapter 4. The moment I pushed open the door and saw Linda's sleeping face, even my breathing slowed. If there was one thing that had kept me from being crushed by rumors and gossip over the past year, it was undoubtedly her. From a poor rural village to a dazzling city overflowing with neon lights, an entirely new world had opened its doors before me. But behind those heavy doors, whether it was a world of extravagance or a paradise beyond imagination, lay a place I had never belonged to and never would. For the past year, I had been lost in an illusion. I thought true love had overcome prejudice. I thought my life had finally become bright and free from suffering. But now, I needed to think carefully. Suddenly, the hand I had rested beside the bed grew warm. Looking down, I saw the little girl frowning in her sleep. Clutching my hand tightly, I wiped away the tears on my face, took a deep breath, straightened my back, and gently squeezed her small hand. Don't be afraid, Mommy's here. Why are you still awake? A slightly hoarse voice sounded behind me, accompanied by the faint scent of alcohol. I didn't turn around. Leaning forward, I tucked the blanket around Linda more securely before pausing. Peter, when are we going to register our marriage? This wasn't a conversation suitable for whispers beside a sleeping child. We walked through the hallway and into the study, crossing my arms. I deliberately kept some distance between myself and the man standing beside me, adopting the posture of someone entering a negotiation. He glanced down at me, perhaps because he didn't care. He made no comment about my sudden seriousness. With a faint chuckle, he removed his watch and asked casually, "Have you finished the books I told you to read?" How had I never noticed such obvious avoidance before? Different. In the end, everything was different. Peter was only Peter after all. I turned away and said nothing more. When he made that decision, there was no way he didn't know how helpless I would feel after learning about it. Yet now, he simply didn't care about that helplessness. My gaze drifted toward the desk on the left. Stacks of books covered its surface. There were introductory books on art appreciation, difficult political theory textbooks, and piles of books on economics and management. Over the past year, he had been like a farmer trying to force a seedling to grow overnight. He wanted to transform me completely in a single leap. At first, I thought I had embarrassed him. I thought I wasn't presentable enough. Yet whenever he introduced me to his friends, he never hid my existence. He always did it openly and without hesitation. The problem was that I had nothing in common with them. Whenever they spoke, the topics were stocks, investment funds, the global economy, currencies, tariffs, or billion-dollar business projects. So when I returned from the restroom one day and overheard them calling me a country hair-washing girl, I couldn't even find a reason to feel hurt. Nor did I ever mention the incident to Peter. I learned quickly when it came to attending banquets and building social connections. Even when I didn't know what to do, people wouldn't dare embarrass me openly for Peter's sake. When he first told me he wanted me to attend university, I thought it was unbelievable. I was eager to prove something. For example, weren't university graduates just working to earn money in the end? If I could make money, wasn't that enough? Even Tsinghua and Peking University aren't as useful as having courage. Plenty of wealthy people never went to college. I don't believe that not attending university means I can't earn money. Do you remember when we first met? I was 50,000 yuan in debt. In just a few years, not only did I pay everything back, but I also built a large house and opened 2 hair salons. I'm actually very good at making money. Even now, my salon is still ranked #1 in our town. Under Peter's helpless gaze, my voice grew softer and softer. Then I smiled bitterly. I almost forgot. The one thing your family never lacks is money. He answered casually. Study hard. If you get in, we'll register our marriage. I looked at him seriously and hesitated before asking. Really? If I get in, will your mother finally like me? After hearing that, he froze for a moment. A long silence followed before he finally replied. She will. My grades in high school had been good. If fate hadn't treated me so poorly, getting into university would have been easy for me. After I received my admission letter, Peter Su followed the Su family's custom and casually donated an entire academic building to the university. Originally, I was supposed to begin classes that September, but now, I looked at Peter. Under the warm light, he was lowering his head and flipping through my notes. Chapter 5. Something decided a month ago could remain completely hidden from me with a single order from him. For an entire month, I knew nothing. When people addressed me as Mrs. Su in public, they had probably laughed at me countless times in private. Look at her, what a fool. She really thinks Peter is going to marry her. But the truth was, I had never thought that. I had only believed that, at the very least, he loved Linda. When I was pregnant with Linda, he was the one who suffered from morning sickness. He was also the one who nearly fell into depression. From the moment our daughter was born, he went from knowing nothing to expertly changing diapers and waking up in the middle of the night to feed her. He practically took care of everything. On Linda's first day of kindergarten, he stood outside the school gates with reddened eyes for half the day. She was the treasure he had welcomed into the world with all his love. I thought he loved her deeply, but I was wrong again. The person who loved Linda had never been Peter. How could the man who loved her ever bear to let her carry the label of an illegitimate child? As the pages continued to turn, my voice cut through the silence, cold and lifeless. You don't want to register our marriage because you're going to marry someone else, aren't you? I saw his body stiffen for a brief moment. The book slipped from between his fingers. Without turning around, he asked, You heard it all? If it hadn't been deliberately arranged for me to hear, how could I possibly have missed it? For an entire month, not a single person had let anything slip in front of me, so why had I suddenly overheard it now? It was nothing more than a cautious test, a way to see just how much I was willing to give up. Back when he pursued me, he had been awkward and clumsy. He rarely spoke and simply worked hard in silence. At that time, my stall always had the freshest and best fish every day. I thought I was just lucky. Only later did I discover that he had secretly arranged it all. Every morning, he would arrive before everyone else and carefully select the best fish, waiting for me to come. But now, everything was different. With power in his hands, he no longer needed to lower himself. He no longer needed to please anyone. Instead, he simply targeted the deepest desires hidden within people's hearts. It was a method far more direct, far easier. Just like now, he turned around. Half his face was illuminated, while the other half remained hidden in shadow. Linda is already in elementary school. You know better than anyone where she'll have a better future. Can you really bear to take her back with you to that impoverished place? His voice softened, carrying a trace of comfort. Serafina, don't be unreasonable. Don't be unreasonable. Your daughter needs a father. She needs a family. She needs a future. When Peter finally left, his expression remained calm. Even after receiving such a hard slap across the face, he still took my hand and carefully checked my palm to make sure I hadn't hurt myself before turning away. The moment his car drove out of sight, my fingernails dug deeply into my burning palm. Whenever we argued in the past, he had always been like this. He would leave the house carrying all his anger. Then he would calm himself down, And afterward, he would come back and coax me until we made up. But this time, he would never come back to comfort me, because I had no reason not to compromise, and he no longer had any reason to bend down for me. Chapter 6. After that day, Peter never came back. I took Linda to the restaurant we had planned to visit, and she was cheerful the entire way. Halfway through our meal, an unexpected guest appeared. The woman wore sunglasses, a custom Chanel outfit, and expensive jewelry adorning her wrist. Peter's future marriage alliance partner. I had never met her before, but I had certainly heard of her. Freya leaned forward and gently touched Linda's cheek. Embarrassed, Linda quickly pulled away. I've heard you've been causing quite a scene at home lately. She looked at me and spoke with surprising sincerity. He already looked into your situation long ago. I'm not exactly a saint, but I'm not a bad person either, so you don't need to worry. Even after we get married, I won't interfere with you or your daughter in any way. After the wedding, he's free to go wherever he wants. It doesn't matter whether he comes home or not. If you have any requests, just tell me. I'll do my best to accommodate them. She spoke as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. There was no concern whatsoever for morality or boundaries. To people like them, marriage was merely another business arrangement. In fact, calling it a partnership was probably more accurate than calling it a marriage. Given the Sue family's status, they feared that if I caused too much trouble, it would reflect poorly on the Liu family as well. So she needed to maintain stability, and among all the relationships she could tolerate her future husband having outside the marriage, I was probably the one she found most acceptable. I gently pinched my daughter's cheek and called over a server, asking them to take her outside to play for a while. Miss Freya, then perhaps you can hear my request. I looked at her and spoke slowly. Her expression was calm and gentle. There was no aggression in her demeanor, yet she still carried that unmistakable air of superiority. That attitude of pity and charity from someone standing above another. Pity was actually a very useful emotion to exploit. That afternoon in the restaurant, Freya and I talked for a full 30 minutes. When she finally stood up, she gave me a thoughtful look. As my gaze shifted, I saw Peter approaching from a distance. Linda was brought back to my side, and I lowered my head, focusing only on taking her hand. Several people stood up at once. In the confusion, someone bumped into a server carrying a dish. Just as it looked like the soup was about to spill, I heard the unmistakable click of a camera shutter. I immediately bent down and scooped Linda into my arms. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Peter's outstretched hand pause for a moment. Then he turned and shielded Freya instead. Fortunately, the soup wasn't very hot. A few drops landed harmlessly on my clothes. While the server apologized repeatedly, Peter looked toward us and pressed his lips together. Take them home. His assistant immediately stepped forward and bowed slightly. Miss Ning, this way, please. For one brief moment, I had hoped for an explanation, but Peter withdrew his gaze. He didn't look at me again. A soft sobbing sound came from beside me. Something tugged gently at my hand. Looking down, I saw that my daughter was already crying, tears streaming down her face. With a hurt expression, she asked, "Why didn't Daddy protect us? Doesn't he love Linda anymore?" No. I crouched down and looked at her. Mommy promises you that Daddy will always love Linda. There will never be another exception. My voice was gentle as I reassured her. No matter the cost, she would remain Peter's most beloved daughter. Freya was a renowned cellist. She would never have arranged paparazzi photographers on her own initiative, and within families like the Sue family, reporting such matters to outsiders was unthinkable. But what she hadn't expected was that, in that moment, Peter would choose her side. A few gossip reporters were nothing to him. With a single command, he could have made them disappear. There was no reason for him to be cautious. Frowning, he said coldly, "Who gave you permission to meet them?" Freya looked displeased. I had to know what kind of woman my future husband is keeping outside. Besides, I can tell you like her quite a bit. Wasn't I helping you by trying to keep her from leaving? Peter loosened his cufflinks and sat inside the car. Then he glanced at her. Keep her? Who told you she's going to leave? Freya said nothing more. He looked confident, certain, as though he firmly believed everything remained under his control. So much so that he probably couldn't see it. Beneath that woman's calm expression lay a determination to leave that was stronger than anyone could imagine. Chapter 7. This was the first time I had met Peter's mother alone. She came from an equally distinguished family. Her abilities, education, and refinement far surpassed those of ordinary people. People who had spent their lives in positions of power often made others nervous without even trying. That was one of the reasons I had always avoided interacting with her too much. But today, I had come prepared. I would hold my head high and put away all my fear. Without wasting words, I went straight to the point. I can leave. Unlike a year ago, she showed no urgency. Instead, she said calmly, whether he marries or not, or who he marries, makes very little difference to you. You have a daughter. If you take her away, all you'll have waiting for you is a difficult life. Hasn't this past year been enough to show you what wealthy and powerful men are really like? Even if he kept 10 or 8 women outside, no one would think twice about it. Besides, you and your daughter are different from those women. The only thing you're missing is a title and legal status. None of the resources you deserve will be taken away. For a child's sake, isn't a little humiliation worth enduring? In families like ours, isn't enduring some grievances simply expected? Everyone knew that if you could control a child, you could control a mother's entire life. But what if I had never planned to take my daughter with me from the beginning? I could abandon everything. I could return to poverty and hardship. I could start over from nothing. But Linda couldn't. She had to remain with the Sue family, and she had to remain there openly and legitimately. I believed that even if I left with nothing, I would eventually build a new life. I knew how to make money. I knew how to endure hardship. I could provide her with a comfortable upbringing. But compared to the Sue family, all of that was insignificant. Their wealth was the starting point built upon generations of effort. It was a ladder to the heavens that almost no one could ever hope to climb. The Sue family stood at the peak of society. Even Zhongmao Group was merely a testing ground Peter's father had prepared for him. His uncles and cousins had spread across countless fields: law, education, medicine, business, and politics. Even the least respected illegitimate son of the Sue family held the position of president of a major bank. Looking at her, I spoke calmly. Linda is a member of the Sue family, isn't she? Keeping me here doesn't benefit your family in any way. I can leave, but on one condition. Linda must be officially registered as Peter's eldest daughter in the Sue family household registry. As long as she's registered, her mother can be listed as deceased. I paused. And one more thing. I hope you will personally raise Linda. A faint smile appeared on her face. I don't like your child, and trusting her to me doesn't seem very wise. For all this time, she had looked down on me and disliked me, yet she had rarely gone out of her way to make my life difficult. When she first wanted to get rid of me, her solution had simply been to offer me money and send me away. Perhaps because, in her eyes, I wasn't worth the effort. There were probably countless women like me. As long as we didn't threaten the Sue family's core interests, we were insignificant. As for Linda, she was the best choice I could think of. I looked at her firmly. This is my only request. Consider it repayment for the debt your son owes me for saving his life. She said nothing. Instead, she instructed someone to escort me out. Before I left, one of her assistants slipped a bank card into my hand. There's a sum of money in this account. Madam also asked me to tell you that whether you choose to live in China or abroad, anywhere in the world, she can arrange a house for you there. I knew what that meant. She had agreed. I accepted nothing. I didn't take the card. I didn't agree to the house. The cleaner my departure was, the more guilty they would feel toward Linda. And in the future, no one would dare bully her so easily. Chapter 8. By the time I returned to the villa, night had already fallen. Peter was sitting on the sofa, absent-mindedly turning a remote control over in his hand. I looked up at the television screen. It was the surveillance footage of Aunt Jade. Aunt Jade is getting older. She won't be staying here anymore. He looked at me, his gaze pausing briefly. You can hire a few new nannies. Just choose whichever ones you like. The exhaustion between his brows was impossible to hide. Deep within his eyes lingered traces of guilt, though they were difficult to discern. Peter, Mrs. Sue, Aunt Jade twisted the hem of her clothes in her hands and pleaded desperately. I shouldn't have said those things. I was wrong. Please don't send me away. Please, don't make me leave. I folded my arms and had no intention of speaking on her behalf. At that moment, a young woman in a business suit entered from outside. After glancing at us, she bowed. I'm sorry. I apologize on my mother's behalf. I'll take her away. Without waiting for a response, she grabbed Aunt Jade and dragged her away to pack her belongings. Soon, only Peter and I remained in the living room. Neither of us spoke. The silence stretched endlessly. After a long time, he stepped beside me. His well-defined fingers cautiously found mine. The touch was so light it felt like a passing breeze. Serafina, other than that matter, anything else you dislike, anything at all, if you tell me, I'll take care of it for you. So this was an apology. This was his attempt to comfort me. Within the boundaries of his world, anyone I disliked and anything that upset me could be dealt with perfectly. But what was the point? This was the limit of what he could offer. What he wanted was for me to stand behind him. As long as I obediently stayed behind him, relying on him and benefiting from his protection, everything would be fine. But I could never stand beside him. That place was never meant for me. Then let's separate. I pulled my hand away. Only after the words left my mouth did I realize what I had said. Turning toward the window, I laughed softly. I forgot. The man I married wasn't you, Peter. It turned out that even our parting required no formal divorce. He grabbed my chin and forced me to face him. His eyes were cold. Don't say ridiculous things. Linda needs both her father and mother. I looked at him deeply, for so long that I felt as though I was carving his face into my heart one final time, only to dig it back out with my own hands. Then I turned away and walked upstairs. As I passed Aunt Jade's room, an argument drifted through the partially open door. You've been a nanny for over 20 years. How did you become so foolish now that you're older? The master's family matters are none of your business. I thought you liked Peter. If he could choose a woman from the countryside, why couldn't you? The younger woman was trembling with anger. That was years ago. Because you insisted on staying with the Sioux family as a nanny. I grew up alongside the Sioux children, from elite elementary schools to international high schools. Then I studied abroad with them. After returning home, I joined Zhongmao Group. I'm still young and already a department manager. Have you ever thought about how much luck it took for a nanny's daughter to have the life I have now? Do you think I've lost my mind? Even if young Master Sioux wasn't marrying some country girl, did you really think he'd marry a nanny's daughter? Fortunately, they didn't take this out on me. Pack your things. I'm taking you back to our hometown tomorrow. The surveillance footage had been uploaded by me. After working as a nanny for so many years, she had forgotten her place. She had begun overstepping boundaries and acting as though she were entitled to make decisions herself. Originally, I only wanted Peter to be cautious. After I left, I didn't want him to remain completely unaware of Aunt Jade's behavior and allow Linda to be hurt behind his back. But I never expected him to make such a drastic decision, or to be so ruthless. She had worked for the Sioux family for over 20 years. By her own account, she had watched Peter grow up. Throughout all this time, I had ignored the hostility she showed toward me. Besides, I had always believed it didn't matter. There were far too many people in this world who disliked us. But there was one thing she should never have done. She should never have said those things to my Linda. On the night before my departure, I sat beside Linda and looked at her with reluctance. Such a small child. Sweet, clever, beautiful, and bright. She would surely grow up healthy and safe. I touched her earlobe gently. Then I brushed her nose with my fingertip. There wasn't a single part of her I could bear to leave behind. Children are sensitive. Perhaps she sensed that something was wrong. She just couldn't understand the complicated world of adults. Mommy, can I have your little sponge cakes for breakfast tomorrow? She shook my arm and acted spoiled. My nose stung with emotion as I smiled. Of course you can. She was so sleepy that her eyelids kept drooping. Yet she continued asking again and again. Will I really get to eat Mommy's sponge cakes tomorrow morning? Only after hearing my repeated promises did she finally close her eyes and drift peacefully to sleep. I held her in my arms, and the moment she fell asleep, the tears I had been holding back burst free like a broken dam. Chapter 9. When I left, I did so as casually as if I were simply going out for a walk. so casually that no one noticed anything unusual. When I had arrived here, I brought only my daughter. When I left, the only thing I took with me was longing. After returning home, the first thing I did was go to the local police station to remove my household registration. The 2 death certificates in my hand had been arranged by Peter's mother. That day, I sat on a bench in the lobby for a very, very long time. So long that the sun set. So long that the staff finished work and went home. In the end, I fled the police station as though escaping from something. Not until the 3rd day did I finally stand up and fill out the application form, one careful stroke at a time. The first time I had processed a death registration cancellation was when I was 15 years old, after my grandmother passed away. Back then, most girls in the village left school to work in factories, but she saved crumpled banknotes one after another and proudly told everyone she met, "Our Serafina is going to study. She'll make something of herself." Fate is full of surprises. Sometimes the ocean gives its gifts to a stream before reclaiming them. Peter, who had been thrown into the sea by someone's scheme, entered my life that way. He had no memories, no identity. Even the police station couldn't find any information about him, and he refused to follow anyone else. Instead, he shamelessly squatted outside my rundown house and refused to leave. The problem was that he didn't know how to do anything. I thought that losing his memory had made him forget even how to survive. But he was incredibly smart. Whatever he learned quickly. Every morning, I woke up before dawn to sell fish at the market. He followed fishermen onto their boats. After work, I took a part-time job managing an internet cafe. His computer skills ended up being better than mine. I thought working for wages was too slow if I wanted to get ahead, so I borrowed money and rented a small storefront. He quickly learned how to handle inventory and deliveries. The shop did well, but I wanted something bigger. Using the money we earned, I opened 2 more stores. Business continued to grow. During those years, no matter what crazy idea I came up with, he followed along without complaint. No matter how often I tried to chase him away, he never left. One day, he came running through the rain again. His clothes were soaked through, yet somehow the bouquet he carried remained perfectly protected. That was when I finally asked him, "I've saved a little money now. I think I can afford to start a family. Will you marry me?" For the first time in years, I had a family again. I gave him my surname. I named him Casey Ning. Later, we had Linda. We built a house. We planned that when she started school, we would move to the city and buy another home there. But fate has a way of correcting what it considers misplaced. The hand of destiny reached down and set everything back in order. And so, everything returned to the way it had been in the beginning. Chapter 10. I sold the shop and came away with a decent sum of money. I was preparing to go somewhere farther away. The house, though crudely built, held my memories and my roots. Besides, it wasn't worth much on the market anyway. When I finished packing and stepped outside, a black car was parked at the gate. Back when we were building this house, we used to dream about the future. We said that once we made enough money, we'd buy a car. Then during the holidays, we'd drive it home and park it right here in the courtyard. It would look impressive. I watched as Peter carried Linda out of the car. The moment her feet touched the ground, she ran toward me, throwing her arms around me. She burst into tears. Her eyes were already swollen and red from crying. "Mommy, don't you want Linda anymore? Daddy said you came here to take care of something and would be back soon. But you've been gone for so many days." The neighbors gathered around to watch. Serafina's husband and daughter are back. They've made a fortune. Look at that luxury car. I looked at Peter for the first time in many days. He wore a simple black cashmere turtleneck. Even without the trappings of luxury brands, he carried an undeniable presence. Standing here now, he was completely different from the man he used to be. Our gazes met and locked. He understood better than anyone what my departure truly meant. I didn't hug Linda. I didn't answer her. After a long silence, Peter finally seemed to realize something. His hand clenched tightly. Slowly, he crouched down. "Linda, come here. Tell Mommy." He looked at the little face that resembled Serafina so much. "Tell her Daddy was wrong. Ask her to come home with us, okay?" After hearing him, the little girl flew back to my side like a small bird. This time, she waved me closer and whispered into my ear, She had plenty of friends here. Almost every child in the village liked playing with her. Yet she clung tightly to my hand. No matter who called for her, she refused to leave. Only after Linda had finally fallen asleep did Peter speak. If you want to stay here for a while, then Linda and I will stay with you. When you've had enough, we'll go home together. Peter, I looked at him in confusion. I didn't meet you at the height of your success. You only regained your memories. You didn't forget everything we lived through together. Why did you become like this? How can you possibly think that I should stay by your side without any status, without any place, as if that's only natural? Actually, maybe you haven't changed at all. Maybe this is who you've always been. The person I fell in love with was Casey, the man who had lost his memory, not Peter. How ridiculous. I had fallen in love with someone who didn't even exist in this world. I understand you. I understand all of you. I won't resent you for being born into wealth, and I won't blame myself for not being rich enough. I only hope you'll take good care of Linda. Perhaps the familiar surroundings had awakened old feelings. He looked at my panic-stricken retreat, step after step. Then he reached out and gently wiped away the tears on my face. A faint smile appeared on his lips. For a moment, he looked a little like the Casey I remembered. I always knew you were stubborn. When you make up your mind, you can abandon anything. Serafina, give me some time to think. Don't be so absolute. Whenever he found himself cornered with nowhere left to retreat, he always tried to buy time. But in the end, the outcome never changed. Just like years ago, when I pretended to go on a blind date, he cried so hard that I couldn't bear to watch. Just wait a little longer. I can make money. Please don't marry someone else. Back then, Casey had waited long enough to get the happy ending he wanted. But Peter would never get that chance again. Chapter 11. He bought the shop back. Despite the obvious displeasure of the previous owner, he paid 3 times the original price. This place is the result of years of our hard work, he said as he naturally returned to the kitchen as if he had never left. I forced a smile. The 2 shops together weren't even worth $200,000. That wasn't enough to cover the price of a single bottle of wine for him. Calling it years of hard work felt almost ridiculous. A thunderous commotion suddenly erupted outside the door. In the next instant, a large group of construction workers poured in. I immediately looked at Peter. He poked his head out and explained, "Didn't we agree on renovating? I've already had the blueprints designed and arranged the contractors. Just leave it to them." Power and status really were a fine disguise. When he wasn't living among the wealthy elite, he could lower himself and accommodate others at every turn. But once he returned to that world, everything became different again. I lowered my head and wiped Linda's face, no longer bothering myself with what he was doing. He wouldn't keep this up for long. After acting on impulse for a few days, he would naturally give up. Yet several days passed, and he remained unwavering. He busied himself with everything as though nothing had ever happened. For a brief moment, it felt as if our lives had returned to the way they used to be. When I woke up in the morning and led Linda to wash up, 2 toothbrush cups sat neatly on the sink. The toothbrushes already had toothpaste squeezed onto them. On the dining table in the living room sat the breakfast he had prepared before dawn, along with a bouquet of flowers that appeared every single day without fail. He was so busy he barely had time to breathe. Besides coordinating with the renovation team, he still had to squeeze in calls to handle company matters. Even amid all the chaos, he somehow found time to unpack my luggage and put everything back in its proper place. One item at a time. Whenever Linda ran toward him, he would crouch down and ask softly, "Did you tell Mommy today that Daddy was wrong?" Linda looked troubled. "Why doesn't Daddy tell her himself?" Peter froze for a moment. Then he gently patted her head and said nothing more. Chapter 12. That day, it wasn't until darkness had fallen and rain was pouring relentlessly from the sky that Peter finally returned. He was carrying something in his hands. His entire body was soaked. His wet hair hung over his forehead, covering his eyes. I went to buy water lilies. It took longer than I expected. Without looking at me, he went straight into the kitchen. The elderly woman who sold water lilies here had broken her leg half a month ago and hadn't been able to set up her stall since. And on the day Peter got into the car accident, he had been on his way to buy water lilies for Linda and me. Looking at his figure, I could no longer suppress the resentment I had buried deep inside these past days. Before he could do anything, I swept all the water lilies onto the floor. Then I crushed them one by one beneath my feet. Why didn't you just die? I cried hysterically as I confronted him. Why didn't you die in that car accident? Why would you do this to me? I hated him. I hated him because he wasn't cruel enough to be completely heartless. I hated him because he didn't love deeply enough to give everything. I hated him so much that I wanted him dead. Yet in the middle of the night, whenever I remembered the way he had loved me, I couldn't help but wish for his safety and peace year after year. How fortunate he was. My love for him was so deep that even my hatred carried tenderness. Peter dropped to his knees and pulled me tightly into his arms. The force of his embrace was almost frightening. Serafina, is there really no other way? Again and again, he stroked my hair. His voice was hoarse. Let's get married. Let's register our marriage. We'll do it as Peter. We'll use Peter's identity. Please. Okay? I would never be deceived by him again. Peter, whether it's a political marriage or a business alliance, whatever it is, you need to remain at the very top. You need to keep the Sue family firmly under your control. You need to make sure that wherever my Linda goes in the future, she will always have the courage to move forward without hesitation. What about me? He buried his face against my shoulder. His entire body was trembling. What am I supposed to do? My voice was calm and cold. If Linda didn't need you, I wouldn't even spare you another glance. At some point, Linda had woken up, holding her stuffed toy, her eyes red with tears. She looked at us. Daddy, Mommy, what's wrong? I lowered my head and turned my back to her as I gathered the scattered mess from the floor. Peter stood up and comforted her. After a while, he called my name. I turned to look. Standing behind Linda, he covered her ears with both hands and asked me, "Aren't you afraid? Aren't you afraid that when she grows up, she'll resent you? That she'll hate you for abandoning her?" Meeting the little girl's eyes, filled with pure love and dependence, I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat and forced a smile for her. Then let her resent me. She can blame me however she wants. She can hate me however she chooses. Just pretend her mother is dead. Dead in the year she turned 6. Dead somewhere in the endless sea of people. Chapter 13. Peter took Linda away while she slept, completely unaware. As he walked out through that door carrying their daughter in his arms, his expression had already returned to calmness. He no longer humbled himself or pleaded in vain. He simply said, "Serafina, you're going to regret this." The black car left just as discreetly as it had arrived. Silent, unobtrusive, I watched it drive away, until it became a tiny dot in the distance, until it disappeared completely. From this day forward, every road my daughter walked would be a road leading toward a bright future. A few days later, I received a new household registration booklet. That booklet had gone from 3 pages to 2, from 2 pages to 4, and finally, back to 2. From this moment on, only Peter and Linda remained in this world. A person spends a lifetime watching parts of themselves collapse again and again, only to build new fortresses upon the ruins. Fate brought me here. There was nothing I could do about that. But even among different branches of the same river, a slight push is enough to alter the direction of the current. Having come this far, I have no regrets. On the 18th birthday of the Sue family's granddaughter, a charitable foundation was established with a personal donation of $10 million. As the only girl of her generation in the Sue family, Linda had been the center of attention from the day she was born. Among all the children who grew up around her, no one could rival her status. She stood by the window. The person who should have been standing at the center of the crowd had instead chosen to stay away from it, and no one dared question her choice. Hearing footsteps, she turned around. It was her father, Peter, whom she had not seen much of lately. Though he was nearing 40, he remained remarkably handsome. The faint wrinkles at the corners of his eyes only added to the mature charm that age had given him. Although the relationship between father and daughter was not especially close, everyone knew how much he valued her. "Linda, happy birthday." Following her gaze out the window, he suddenly asked, "Over all these years, have you ever blamed your mother?" Blamed her? Linda tilted her head and looked at him. Peter had been drinking. His eyes seemed distant, lost somewhere far away. For leaving you. For leaving me. For never looking back all these years. Linda smiled. Her beautiful face looked strikingly like her mother's. Then she answered softly, yet with absolute certainty, Dad, there is no one in this world who loves her more than I do. The memories of her childhood were distant. So distant that even her mother's face had become blurred with time. Yet she had never forgotten love. She remembered being 6 years old. She remembered her mother telling her again and again that she had to stay by her father's side. She never understood why. Why couldn't she stay with both her father and her mother? But it didn't matter, because her mother had looked as though she was in so much pain that she might die. As long as Mom could be happy. Staying with Dad was fine. Staying with Grandma was fine too. The only thing that mattered was that Mom could finally smile. Chapter 14. That year, she never delivered her father's message. What she whispered into her mother's ear was, Daddy was wrong, but it's okay if Mommy doesn't forgive him. It's okay. Whatever Mommy wants to do, just go and do it. She didn't want to become a mountain weighing down on her mother. She didn't want to become the chains that trapped her mother in a lifetime of pain. Only when a mother runs far can her daughter run far too. When she was 9 years old, she woke up one morning and suddenly realized she could no longer remember her mother's face. Secretly, she searched out the wedding photo that her father had hidden away. In the picture, her mother was smiling so happily. Unfortunately, her stepmother happened to see her. Flustered, Linda hurriedly hid the photograph behind her back and looked at her with pursed lips. Kid, missing your mom isn't embarrassing. If you want to look at her, then look. She bent down, pulled the photo from behind Linda's back, glanced at it, and handed it back. Your mother was very beautiful, and very brave. Her stepmother was a genuinely good person. Even after she and her father eventually divorced, they still kept in touch from time to time. Throughout those years, everyone avoided talking about her mother's brief appearance and long absence. Yet somehow, by unspoken agreement, not a single person was stingy enough to tell a young child things like, your mother didn't want you. She abandoned you. Although Grandma had never been particularly fond of her, Linda had lived in the old family residence ever since she was 6 years old. All the social etiquette, conversational skills, and philosophies of life she learned while growing up were taught personally by her grandmother. Later, Grandma came to love her deeply. Wherever she went, she was willing to take Linda along. Linda had always secretly hoped that one day her grandmother might say the word if only I hadn't driven your mother away back then. But to Linda, that was a matter as overwhelming as a stormy sea. To her elegant and composed grandmother, however, it had long since become nothing more than a forgotten speck of dust. There are not so many ifs in this world. A conclusion that has already been written cannot be changed. On the morning her mother left, when she was 6 years old, she ate that piece of square rice cake. Only many years later did she finally understand her life. Her mother had wagered everything she possessed for it. Even love itself had been used as a bargaining chip. What her mother fought for was her. The starting point beneath her feet today was already a destination that countless others could never reach, even after several lifetimes of effort. And back then, her mother had only been in her 20s. By the age of 10, she already owned a private horse ranch in one of the most expensive areas in the country. Before turning 15, she had traveled through nearly 30 countries and could fluently speak 4 or 5 languages. At 16, she completed her international high school education. Soon, her years studying in the United States would come to an end. In this world, there were very few things she had to struggle to obtain. Most of the time, all she needed to do was glance at something twice. By the next day, someone would place it before her. Linda couldn't understand it. For 12 years, her father had never spoken about her mother. So why had he chosen today, of all days, to ask that question? Then she remembered the news she had seen that morning. The 35th Private Entrepreneurs Symposium had been held in the capital. Outstanding private entrepreneurs from across the country had been invited to attend. Among them were her mother and her husband. As she grew older, she learned how to use money and influence. Finding information was easy for her. She had heard that after leaving, her mother took a sum of money and went south alone, building everything from scratch. Over the years, her mother did whatever work was available. She sold goods at market stalls. She worked in recyclable waste collection. She ran training centers. She entered the gold jewelry trade in Shuaibei. Almost every business she touched made money. Her mother had always been that kind of person. Whatever she did, she succeeded. Whatever path she chose, she found happiness. She had heard that her mother's husband loved her very much. There was once a photograph of them that became public. In the picture, her husband was giving a speech on stage. Below the stage, her mother was holding up her phone to record him. The happiness in her eyes seemed ready to spill out of the photograph itself. Linda looked at her father. She knew he had made a rare exception and attended the symposium that day. After all these years, she finally spoke the words she had kept inside. "Dad, you were wrong. She never abandoned me. The only person who was ever left behind was you." After saying that, Linda lifted her skirt and walked away. Amid the dazzling lights, she turned back for one last glance. Peter was still standing by the window. Both hands rested against the windowsill. His shoulders were slightly hunched. His figure was swallowed by the shadows as he stared outside, motionless. And beyond the window, the scenery he had once longed for had already vanished forever.